What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of BAM GPG. And we just hired a new defensive coordinator. And this hire has gotten a lot of mixed reactions already. So
Yep.
today, I want to break it all down in a clear, honest way. Who is Jonathan Gannon and what kind of defense does he actually run? What are his strengths and weaknesses? And finally, why Packers fans should legitimately be excited about this hire. But let's get into it.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get into it. So as he mentioned, Green Bay has their guy. They have their replacement, right? So Jonathan Gannon, we know most recently from his head coaching stint there in Arizona. Didn't go so hot for him there, but he's a longtime NFL defensive coach, right? He's been
Yep.
around for a while. He's been around the league for actually over a decade now. So he has some experience and. Again, most fans are going to recognize this name from his defensive coordinator days with the Philadelphia Eagles and then his most recent stint with the Arizona Cardinals. He did go on that Super Bowl run as the defensive coordinator for the Philadelphia Eagles, and he looked great when he was there. So, again, a lot of respect for this guy. He's got a lot of time in the league here. He did work under some really respected defensive minds in this league, right? So like Mike Zimmer. I know Matt Eberflus, his time in Chicago didn't go so well, but he is a good defensive coach. He worked under him as well. So again, this isn't your typical young defensive coordinator, experimental defensive coordinator. This is someone who Green Bay is bringing in who's coached elite defenses in the past, right? He's
Yeah.
coached in big playoff moments. He's coached in the Super Bowl. He's pretty much seen every offensive system there is to see that the league can throw at you, right, Bryson?
Yeah, and I feel like if you have a lot of experience, that means it's a really good hire.
Absolutely, absolutely. So the question, right? What type of defense does Gannon typically like to run, or what have we seen historically from him? Well, at his core, Gannon runs a multiple kind of two high shell defense, right? That's typically what we've seen from him in the past. And you'll see with this defense, you're going to see a lot of split safety, zone coverage, and emphasis on taking away the explosive plays, right? The idea, it's pretty simple when you think about it. Force the offense to keep everything underneath, right? You similar to what you saw with Halfley's defense. Stay disciplined and don't give up that big shot down the field. So he's not. I'm sure most of you have already read. He's not a blitz heavy coordinator by default, right? That's just kind of not his MO. Instead, he relies on coverage disguises and simulated pressures, right? A defensive lineman winning their one-on-ones, and you have Micah Parsons, so you're probably not going to see, based off his history, probably not going to see a lot of blitz packages from him. So his defense, it's really going to boil down to and value communication, versatility, and you're going to have some guys on that defensive side with some smart football IQ, right? And
Mhm.
you're going to need to find some corners that can play zone and man in his type of defense and safeties who can rotate late, which I feel comfortable with Green Bay safeties. Corners, maybe not so much in that scenario. You're also going to have some linebackers that can cover, right? So it'll be important that we address the Quay Walker thing, whether or not we're bringing him back. But when this defense works, it's frustrating as hell for an offense in this league, especially opposing quarterbacks.
But yeah, I feel like if we're gonna have Jonathan Gannon, I think that's his name, as our defensive coordinator, we need to give him some corners. Otherwise, he's not gonna work out.
Yeah, corners absolutely got to be addressed, right? So some of the strengths of his defense, Bryson, here. So let's start with the positives first. We'll get into some of the negatives as well, but there's some real positive ones here with his defense, Bryson. So first, he's excellent at game planning, right? His defensive schemes, game planning, it's excellent. His defenses, you know, typically are very good at taking away the offense's top target, right? He's going to let you try to beat him with your second or third best option on offense. And, you know, honestly, it's kind of the Belichick thing. He takes away your top target. I'd be completely fine with that. Let a team beat you with their second or third option. And second, Bryson, his defenses, they usually improve over time, right? Because there is so many to disguises and coverage shifts, and they tend to start a little bit slower under his defensive strategy. But once players start to understand the system, communication starts to improve, and the breakdowns you'll start to see those drop off with him.
Mhm.
The players, right? And third, he's very player friendly, right? There's been a lot of veteran players that have been with him that consistently say he will tell you that he communicates very, very well with the players, and he puts them in the positions to understand. He doesn't overwhelm them with different schemes and coverages. And finally, Bryson, his defenses, right? He and his game planning. He seems to be very adaptable, right? When he has elite pass rushers, which he will in Green Bay with Micah Parsons, he lets him cook, right?
Mhm.
When he doesn't, he leans more. He kind of leans heavier on coverage and disguise.
Yeah, but I feel like the like friendly players, that's the most important thing. Cause it doesn't matter how good you are at anything else. If you're good with players, then you should be a good defensive coordinator.
I agree. You have a good scheme. You can work with the players. It should be a good fit. So
Doesn't matter how good you are at other things. That's the most important thing.
yeah, absolutely. So here's Bryson. Here's some of the weaknesses, historically from his defenses, and honestly, what has a lot of fans concerned here. Right now, I'm going to get into them here, Bryson, and then we'll kind of talk about it here. But, Gannon's biggest criticism has always been kind of his passivity, right, on defense. There are stretches where, his defense may feel a little bit too conservative at times, especially on third down or late in games. And fans, they've seen units really allow long, methodical drives because they refuse to gamble, right? You don't see these blitz packages out of his defenses typically, which allows you to get kind of nicked and dinged down the field sometimes. And that can be frustrating, especially as a fan watching the game. I get it. Um, you want to see more aggression, right? You want to see attacking defenses, but this typically isn't his style, especially as defensive coordinator. Another major concern historically from him is his red zone performances. Defenses, occasionally tend to struggle tightening up once an offense is inside the 20 and the pass rush isn't getting home for you, right? And yes, there's going to be communication breakdowns, right? This defense, when that happens, his defense can give up big plays, and that's the risk of all these disguises and rotations that he likes to run in his defenses. So, if you're a fan and you're critical of some of these, you have every right to criticize him. That it's a fair criticism of his defenses.
Well, and I feel like if he's gonna be a good defensive coordinator, he's got to be a risk taker.
You're going to have to find some risks. I 100% agree with that, Bryson. You have to be able to take some risks in this league as well. So, again, here, Packer fans, we went through the negative, but I want to get you excited about this, right? And here's why you should be excited. You know, the key part, and context matters when you talk about this, especially with a new hire. Jonathan Gannon, he's walking into one of the most talented young defensive cores in the NFL with the Green Bay Packers this league. And this roster, it's basically built perfectly to run Jonathan Gannon's system. You've got athletic safeties, corners. Again, you're going to have to address the cornerback position.
Yeah.
But you have safeties, that are able to rotate and disguise coverages. McKinney, Evan Williams, Bullard really picked up his play there towards the end of the year. And a defensive line, when you have Wyatt there healthy and you got Micah Parsons back healthy, you may want to add a little bit more beef, but you have a defensive line that can win without having to consistently blitz linebacker safeties or bringing corners down. So most importantly, this defense desperately needed more structure and clarity, right? And too often recently, and we've seen it even under Jeff Halfley, Bryson, players could look confused at times, right? Out of position sometimes and unsure of their responsibilities. Especially, we go to the games live, you see it a lot.
Yeah.
Players, typically their hands up in the air, they don't quite know where they're supposed to be in the rotation. So, really hopeful that Gannon's defense can add some clarity to that. How be more understanding to the players, have a clearer picture for them. So
Mhm.
again, Gannon's system, it really emphasizes communication, right? Assignment soundness, which we need in situational football. And that alone should raise the floor for this young defensive core for the Green Bay Packers. And with the offensive firepower that Green Bay has and is shown to have, there's no reason this defense doesn't need to go out there and win. I'm not saying the defense doesn't need to go out there and win the game, but they don't have to go out there and be flashy every single time they're out there. It just needs to be reliable. It's got to get, the opposing team's offense off the field. And if Gannon, if he's able to, as you mentioned, Bryson, combine his coverage structure with just, a little bit more situational aggression on the defensive side, this could quietly become, one of the most efficient defenses, not only in the NFC, but in the NFL.
Well, it already is, but um, like obviously, like I said, you gotta take risks because you saw how it turned out with Joe Barry when he didn't really take that many risks.
Yeah, just don't be a Joe Barry. That's what we
Yes.
ask. So I get it. Yes, Bryson, this isn't the splashy hire a lot of Packer fans were hoping for. It's not the loud, aggressive name everyone was wanting here, but it's a smart, it's experience, and it just fits the roster perfectly, right? This defensive core for Green Bay, Jonathan Gannon, he gives the Packers, a defense that's going to be built for January football. It's disciplined, it's adaptable, and it's tough to beat when offense is getting patient, right? Especially late in the year. Now, the question is not whether his system works, Bryson. It's going to be whether Green Bay can unlock the best version of his system. So, as a Packer fan, you have to be. I think you have to be optimistic about this hire.
Yeah.
Um, Again, historically, he's had great runs as a defensive coordinator, not so much as the head coach, but and again, there's that argument that, some people are just coordinators, right? And I think he probably falls under that umbrella. His head coaching stint didn't go so well, but he has history of being a great defensive coordinator. There's no doubt about that, Bryson. So
Yep.
I'm excited to see what Green Bay does. Rich Bisaccia still has the job, and hopefully that changes here soon. Yes, we need to do something with that special teams unit, absolutely. But I'm excited about this hire, Bryson.
Yeah.
Again, I know he's not that big splashy name, the one that's going to give you that spark, that aggression on defense, but he's going to bring with him a system that's proven it works. And he's ran it well in the past. You just got to get him the right players around him. Green Bay, they got to shore up that linebacker position with Quay Walker, and then they got to go out and address that cornerback room, and I think they'll be just fine, right? So we'll be back with some more. And, congratulations to the Super Bowl teams. You had the Seattle Seahawks winning tonight
Yeah.
and the New England Patriots. So we have a rematch of that one. Hopefully they get down to that for they get down to that goal line. Hopefully Seattle runs it this time with Kenneth Walker. So as always, Bryson,
Let's go, Pat. Go.